On July 4th, during this intense period, a Palestinian rammed a car into pedestrians at a bus stop in Tel Aviv, injuring 8 people before being shot dead by a passerby. Also that night, Hamas fired rockets into Israel, and then Israel responded with strikes on what it said was an underground weapon site. So just to give some context to the intense violence happening here, what do you think about Hamas firing rockets into Israel?
Well, it's the framing makes it seem as though like unprovoked Hamas is like firing rockets onto Israel, regardless of what I think of Hamas, obviously, but unprovoked. But that's not the case. The provocation is the fact that they are forced to live in a cage, that they have no access to clean water, they have no access to basic rights, no access to uh, imports, no access to anything, that they can't leave. They're living in a densely populated enclave that was deemed uninhabitable by the UN, that was deemed an open air prison. So the rockets, in any case, are retaliation for the siege. Let's start there. But again, this is just to prove my point. Violence begets violence. Palestinian people are not violent people. We are not violent people at the core. And I think, what serves this narrative is Islamophobia, is like xenophobia towards Arabs, which we don't have. Like, I don't have the luxury, to write laws about. Um, by the way, I'm quite, frustrated by this. I am preoccupied, and the Palestinian people are preoccupied with the material violence that we have to deal with on the day to day, the demolitions, the bombings, the imprisonment. That's what we're distracted with and busy with, that we can't even talk about the racism, the casual racism against us, the anti-Palestinian racism, be it in the media, on social media, in diplomatic circles, but all of this racism that has gone unchecked, that has not been regulated for decades, allows for these tropes to continue, in which Palestinians are promoted as these like barbaric terrorists, and the only way we could remedy that situation is by marketing them as these like defenseless victims. But the fact of the matter is not this simplistic. Palestinian people are human beings who should enjoy a full spectrum of humanity, which includes rage, which includes disdain, which includes happiness and joy and laughter, which includes celebration, which includes um, all of these things. But we're not allowed this. But we are doing exactly what any people throughout history who have been oppressed, who have been colonized, who have been occupied, have done and continue to do, as we see in Ukraine, which is celebrated by mainstream media. I'm sorry to keep reiterating this point, but at this point, I am quite, exhausted by how exceptional Palestine and Palestinian resistance is, when the world tells me time and time again that it doesn't have a problem with violence, it just has a problem with who does that violence.
Do you, in your mind, and in the way you see this region, draw a distinction between the people in power versus the regular people? So you mentioned the Palestinian people. Is there something you can comment on Hamas and the PLO? Do you see them as fundamentally different from the people? What does Hamas do well? Where did they fall short?
I think governments, wherever globally, yani, are different from people. No government is a true reflection of its people. I think, this is even true in the case of like Arab countries that normalize with Israel. In many of the cases, they're unelected governments. I think the Palestinian Authority continues to fail. I think they are subcontractors of the Israeli regime through their security coordination. And also, I'd like to use this as an opportunity to comment a little bit on the analogy thing, not to like stray away from the question, but the Palestinian Authority 2 years ago killed an opposition activist named Nizar Banat. It was a horrendous crime, and I was in Ramallah with the people protesting against the Palestinian Authority, And at some point, they had their batons, the Palestinian Authority police, and they beat us with it. And many of the people in the crowd were likening the Palestinian Authority to Zionism. I think this is what people do when they are confronted by a great evil. They liken it to some other great evil. And this is where the Hitler analogy came from. Again, I don't think it's like the best strategy moving forward, but I refuse, to be, criminalized for a little sentence.
But to linger on those in power, so one of the criticisms towards Hamas and PLO, towards the Israeli government, at least the current coalition government, is that there's a lot of incentive to sort of perpetuate violence to maintain power. There's a hunger for power and maintaining that power amongst the powerful. That's the way power works. So is there a worry you have about those in power not having the best interests of its people? So those in power, the PLO, Hamas, not being incentivized towards peace, towards justice.
Looking at the PA's action today, it tells you a great deal about what they're interested in and what they're not interested in. And maybe, the occupation is in their best interest. And you can infer similar things looking at Hamas. But these two entities virtually have no power, even Hamas. There is, the context that Hamas is permitted by international law to use armed resistance, blah, blah, blah. Does that mean Hamas is like equipped to govern Gaza? I don't think so. Does that mean that people around Palestine necessarily want to live under Hamas rule? In 2006, Hamas was democratically elected. I don't know if that's still the case today. There's a lot to be said, but neither of these entities have any real power in perpetuating. The only body that has access, that can flip the switch on all of this equation, is the Israelis. They're the ones who are keeping people in a cage. They're the ones who are wrapping the West Bank with a wall. Everything else to me is just secondary, regardless of what I think personally of any of those people. I know personally, for me, the world I envision, not just Palestine, the world I envision is a world that goes beyond states, that goes beyond this framing of power, this hierarchy in which some people rule over other people. This whole idea of nation states, be it Israel or any other nation states, it's futile. It's not good. It's exclusive. I think that we can achieve a better world than that.
Well, how do you do a better world? Actually, if you just linger on that, like what, politically speaking, geopolitically, you have to have representation of the people. You have to have laws, and you have to have leaders and governing bodies that enact those laws and all those kinds of things. You probably need to have militaries to protect the people.
Can you not imagine a world without militaries?
I can imagine it, but we're not in that world.
Yeah. I'm not saying, I have all the answers or a PowerPoint in my pocket, with the instructions, but I'm saying the world I'd like to live in is one that transcends borders, is one that, does not necessitate militaries, that doesn't necessitate all of these prisons, all of these walls, all of these racist laws.
So you don't think violence is a fundamental part of human nature that emerges and combined with the hunger for power?
I do think that both of these things are like truly intrinsic to human beings, but I also do think there is a way to move beyond them. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm tempted to say sway, but
but you have a hope that there doesn't have to be war.
Yeah,
in the world.
definitely.